This chapter on corporate bonds is primarily to understand what are the various kinds of bonds that are there, what are the various cash flows that are associated with a bond, and probably what are the various mechanisms that are available if I want to close the bond or call back the bond, redeem the bond. So that's the total flow that is being talked about in this. So just as a quick start into this chapter, every bond has what is called as an indenture. Indenture is more like a prospectus, right? Probably the full-fledged details about everything about the bond, which will contain probably what. See, bond is like a borrowing. I'm issuing a bond is like I'm borrowing something. So, what are the obligations of the borrower? When, how much he will pay at what point in time? So, all these things are captured as a part of indenture. And apart from that, even the indenture will also talk about kind of do's and don'ts of the borrower. Probably he should not borrow even more without our notice, or probably he should not give a dividend of more than this much amount. The company should not give more than a dividend of this much amount without the permission of the bondholders. So these kind of do's and don'ts also are mentioned as a part of indenture. So apart from that, okay, how much will be paid at what point in time, and if at all the company defaults in terms of payment, what would be done, any collaterals, all these kind of details, including can the company call back the bond in the middle, or will it go until maturity period? Can the company buy back the bond somewhere in the middle itself without taking it until the maturity? All these kind of things are mentioned at the time of issuing of the bond itself, not in the middle. Whatever, it's like a prospectus, whatever is written in the bond indenture, only those things can, I mean, it's mandatory for the issuer to stick to those things, right? And to make sure that the bond will fulfill its obligations, a trustee is maintained for every issue, for every bond issue. A trustee is what is coming into picture. It's a third party to the contract, not a member of the company or something, not a CEO of the company. It's a third party which is having a lot of reputation, who is having a lot of reputation with respect to acting in these kind of roles. Main intention is authenticating, or probably giving a kind of assurance that the company will pay the interest as well as principal on time, because it's like a borrowing. The company will pay the interest and the principal, and even the trustee has a kind of responsibility to ensure that whatever the obligations that are shown in the indenture, whatever the do's and don'ts that are mentioned in the indenture, they are all adhered by the issuer. So generally this role is performed by a bank or some kind of a trust who have a lot of expertise in trustee functions. And one more key aspect with respect to bonds is earlier retirement is very much possible. Early retirement is call back the bond before the maturity date itself. This is very much possible, but it has to be mentioned in the indenture. Right? Though the bond initially it has been issued for a 10-year period, the maturity period being 10 years, if the company wants to scrap the bonds after 5 years, or the better word to use is either redeem the bonds or probably retire the bonds or call back the bond, all are the same similar kind of name. So the company wants to retire the bond, let's say within 5 years, not until 10 years, then that is what we call as a callback provision on the bond. And if the company wants to exercise that kind of a provision, it's again a call option, right? If you want, you can buy back your bond. Otherwise, you need not buy back. Looking more similar to a call option. If you want, you can buy the share in future. Otherwise, don't buy. Similarly, here saying if you want, you buy back your bond. Otherwise, don't buy back. So more or less, it's a replica of call option. That's where we call it as callback. Callback, or sometimes we call it as callable bond. Callable is nothing but call option is present on that particular bond. Whereas when we say puttable bond, if you want, you can sell it. This feature will be available to the investor. If you want to sell off your bond back to the company, you sell it. Otherwise, you keep it until maturity. But when I say callable bond, if the issuer or if the company wants to buy back the bond, it can do it. Otherwise, it will not. So, whether there is an early retirement provision that is available, which is like something like a callability, and we'll also talk about a few more early retirement options. So, if at all these kind of options are available, they have to be mentioned in the indenture itself. And even the maturity date, which is nothing but the date until that particular date, the interest will continue. The interest will continue until that date, and principal payment should be over by that date. That is what we are calling as a maturity date. And how do we see from the bond standpoint? We are seeing almost every kind of entity can typically issue a bond. Either there are some infrastructure kind of bonds, public utilities kind of bonds. See, a water department will issue a bond. Probably a power department will issue a bonds, right? These are all some public utilities departments issuing the bonds, and where the borrowed money is utilized for those public utilities investments, right? Roads and buildings, they can issue bonds for the improvement of the roads. They are all public utility specific bonds. Sometimes you have a transportation kind of bonds, especially in US we find these kind of various categories. Industrial bonds, which are more for probably a typical growth, right? An L&T may issue a bond typically for the growth of its business. These kind of bonds are typically categorized to industrial, or sometimes a bank and finance companies. Probably a Muthoot Finance can come out with a bond issue which will finance its expansion plan. Or like that, every bank can come out, or so the various entities are probably here. We see a lot of infrastructure bonds, right? Whatever the capital that is raised, it is put in the infrastructure industry. So all these things are going into the category of corporate bonds. Now, some of the things, specific things associated with a bond. One major thing that comes out is coupon. Some key characteristics, if we are looking at the bond, one main characteristic is coupon, which is like a regular payment, right? Instead of paying everything at maturity, we are talking about some periodic payment, which we have already seen earlier. Either it could be a fixed rate coupon or a floating rate coupon. So, or it could be a zero coupon, right? In case of swaps, we have looked at a lot of these aspects. There is a fixed rate payment or a floating rate payment. So, coupon is also like a periodic payment that happens on a bond at regular intervals. It has nothing to do with the market interest rate. It's a characteristic of a bond. It's not a characteristic of the market. The bond may pay more interest than what the market rate is, or less interest than what the market rate is, or it may not pay anything, which becomes a zero coupon bond, right? So in case of zero coupon bonds, we are talking of no intermediate payments, right? This is what is the funda we have used for arriving at our spot rates also. Zero coupon bonds which are not delivered anything in the middle, and everything on the face value on the maturity. So they are always issued at a discount to the face value, because face value is what is paid on maturity and nothing is paid intermediate. So they have to be issued at a much cheaper rate to the face value. to make sure that you are giving the face value at maturity, probably which will add up to either 5% or 8% or 10% kind of a return between this period. So the present, let's say if you are giving 1000 is the face value after 5 years. So today it has to be issued at e power RT, whatever is the R, right? If I am assuming that the R is 10%, e power 0.5 is what is the minimum issue rate at this moment. So probably at 800, 700, whatever is the amount, only then it will amount to 1000 after 5 years with probably 10% kind of an interest rate every year. And yeah, here in case of bankruptcy, what will happen? Let's say you have paid 600 to purchase a bond for a 5-year period, and the bond says on maturity it will pay you 1000. Today you pay 600. On maturity, the bond will pay you 1000. Now let's say the company defaulted within 2 years. It became bankrupt. Within 2 years, the company has gone bankrupt. Then what is the claim for the person who has purchased the bond? It will not be 1000, because 1000 will come only after 5 years. But the company has defaulted within 2 years. So if at all the claim has to come for this person, it would be only to the extent of the accrued interest for the 2-year period. Whatever semi-annual compounding or continuous compounding, whatever is the compounding mechanism, right? Whatever is the interest rate, accrued interest, because in case of zero coupon bonds, the interest is only accrued. Let's say you have taken an FD for 5 years. You have paid 600, but the FD says you will get 1000 after 5 years. But after 2 years, the bank got closed. How much you should get? You should not get 1000.